Welcome back. Today we're looking at a really thoughtful analysis arguing that the attacks on Erika Kirk aren't just political, but are actually a kind of spiritual warfare.
The scriptural foundation is just incredibly solid. I mean, connecting such a raw public tragedy to these timeless spiritual truths, it gives the whole thing so much weight.
It really does. But we see three big opportunities here to, sharpen the focus and really amplify the impact.
Let's get into it.
Okay, first up is about how the argument flows. The central idea that this is spiritual warfare showing up in the physical world. It's powerful stuff.
It is.
But the way it's delivered, it feels a bit associative. It jumps between these huge cosmic ideas and then really mundane things, and that can kind of water down the impact.
Yeah, that fragmentation is definitely something I felt. You're trying to keep your balance as a listener.
Right.
You get this massive theological concept, like the battle against principalities from Ephesians, which sets this huge unseen stage.
And before you can even process that, you've jumped.
You've completely leaped. Suddenly we're on to the accuser from Revelation, and then a proverb about angry men, and then there's this long detour into true crime podcasts and drama as tasty morsels.
And it feels like those three things, the cosmic, the demonic, and just, human weakness, they get blended together a bit too quickly.
And the risk there is that you accidentally minimize the big spiritual forces by putting them on the same level as like a gossip habit.
Exactly. Does watching true crime cause the spiritual attack, or is it just an example of a human appetite? The link isn't quite clear. The listener has to do too much work.
So the suggestion here is to remap the whole argument. Basically, group the concepts into their own focused section.
Before you move on to how that shows up as, say, anger in the real world.
I really like that. It lets the ideas breathe.
So, for example, you could have one whole section just called the spirit of accusation.
And in there, you could link Revelation, the accuser of the brethren, directly to the Adam and Eve story. Adam blaming Eve.
Yes. Show how that ancient pattern of finger-pointing is exactly what's happening now.
And then you take all those verses about anger and strife, the Proverbs, Ephesians, and move them.
Move them into their own practical segment. Maybe call it the fruits of the flesh, or something like that.
That separation makes it so much clearer. It's like here are the unseen powers, and here's the personal behavior that gives them an opening. It just cleans up the logic entirely.
Okay, let's pivot to the second point. This one is about tone. The material has this powerful spiritual core, but it risks undermining itself by getting really personal and critical of specific public figures.
This is a really subtle but important point. The whole foundation of the piece is that verse, right? We do not wrestle against flesh and blood.
It's the bedrock of the entire argument.
But then, in the application, the piece, it kind of violates its own rule.
It does. It starts focusing on the flesh. It names names, calls people a very angry individual, the queen of conspiracy, the cults of Candace.
And the language gets very emotionally charged. It feels less like spiritual discernment and more like judgment.
Well, let me push back on that a little. Don't you think naming names makes it feel more real, more immediate? If you only talk about mechanisms or spirits, does it risk becoming too abstract for people?
That's a fair question, but look at the cost. The moment you start using those labels, you pull the whole conversation back down into the mud. You're trying to elevate the discussion above the he said, she said, but then you're participating in it. It becomes ad hominem, which is the very thing you're critiquing.
So you lose your high ground.
You completely lose the high ground. The audience might even see it as just another personal grudge, and that just kills the universal message.
So the suggestion is to shift the focus. Stop analyzing the person and start analyzing the pattern.
Exactly. Look at the mechanisms of slander and false witness that are being used in the media.
So instead of saying someone is self-deceived, you describe how their pattern of accusation perfectly fulfills the biblical role of the accuser.
Right. You keep the spiritual lens sharp and consistent, but you avoid the personal attack. It's not about them, it's about the role they are playing.
And what about that part on people profiting from the chaos? The tasty morsels bit.
You could focus on the spirit of avarice itself.
Or even the widespread addiction to chaos.
Oh, that's good, because that turns the critique back on the audience.
It does. It challenges their own media habits, their own appetites. It stops being about pointing a finger at some talking head and becomes an internal challenge for the listener.
Okay, our last point. This is about maximizing the incredible power of the forgiveness theme.
The analysis of forgiveness here is it's the emotional core of the whole piece. Erika Kirk's public state, the parallels to Joseph, it's stunning.
It is, but it comes so late in the piece, and that timing really lessens its impact.
Yeah, it's a structural pacing thing. You have these amazing insights, Genesis 50, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, and that parable of the unforgiving servant, but they're saved for the last third.
So the listener spends, 10 minutes just swimming in the darkness, in the malice, the anger, the accusations?
Right. The problem is front and center for a long, long time, and the solution feels like an afterthought.
It's structured as problem, 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 and then finally solution.
We think it should be here's the solution that frames the problem.
Yes, introduce forgiveness not as the conclusion, but as the counterweapon. It needs to be brought in right after you establish the spiritual attack.
Walk me through that. Why does putting the solution first change the experience so much?
Because it reframes the entire emotional journey. If you start with just the conflict, the listener feels hopeless, maybe outraged.
Okay.
But if you start by saying, look, all of this pain is already operating under a redemptive plan, then every awful accusation you discuss becomes evidence of God's eventual victory, not just a senseless tragedy.
So it shifts the mood from defensive to hopeful. You know the destination from the beginning.
Exactly. You could use that Joseph quote, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good," as the framework for the whole piece. It becomes a promise that hangs over everything.
And you've got to bring in the real-world proof of that sooner.
Oh, the Tim Allen anecdote. Absolutely.
The story about him being moved to forgive his own father because of Erika Kirk's example, that is pure gold.
It's so immediate and powerful. You have to put that in before you get into the deep theology of Joseph or the parables.
Because it shows the listener right away that this isn't just theory. This stuff works. It changes lives right now.
That one shift making forgiveness the spine of the whole piece would take this from a really compelling analysis to a truly powerful message of hope.
I completely agree.
Look, this has been a great discussion about a piece that's already operating at a very high level. The writer's passion and knowledge are obvious.
The foundation is absolutely superb. This is all just about optimizing the structure and the tone to make sure it lands with maximum impact.
So, to recap the big suggestions, first, remap the argument. Separate the cosmic spiritual battle from the practical discussion of human vice. Create clear sections.
Second, refine the tone. Keep the focus on the spiritual patterns and mechanisms, not on personal attacks against specific individuals.
And third, move that powerful theme of forgiveness right to the front. Use it to frame the entire narrative, making it the solution, not just the conclusion.
You make those 3 adjustments, and this piece will go from being powerful to being unforgettable.
We really encourage you to implement these ideas, and please submit the revised material back to us for more feedback. Until next time, keep refining your work.